Hello lovelies, welcome back to my channel. My name is Emma May. If this is your first time stopping by this channel, you're very welcome. On here I share sewing tutorials, pattern drafting, cutting, sewing, basically stuff around the fashion niche. And to all my returning subscribers, thank you so much for stopping by another tutorial. In this video today, I'll be showing you how I made this long red dress with flounce effects, flounce designs, and a cape also at the top. So if this is what you're interested in, please do well to watch this video up to the end and also click on the subscribe button if you haven't, and let's get right into the video. So to start, I have my basic bodice pattern already drafted out here. I have my starting line, which is 0.5 inches from the top. I have my chest line, I have my bust point line, my under bust line, my waist line, my hip line there, and then the end of the paper here will just serve as my knee line. So now I have drawn out my neckline, though I will not be needing that here. I have my armhole curve here, and I have taken out my dart and I shaped up my body. So this is without any allowance, so I'm just going to be adding the allowance on the paper now. So on the chest line there, which has my bust circumference measurements divided by 4, I'm going to be adding 2 inches. On my waistline, I'm going to be adding 3 inches, so I'll take 1 inch for the dart intake and then I'll add 2 extra inches for the allowance. And now on my hip line, I would add 2 inches. So I'm adding this much allowance because I don't want it to be tight, especially at the lower part. Then on the knee line there, I also added 2 inches. So before I added the allowance on the knee, I went in on the knee by 1 inch, just so that I can have a little pencil effect, but it's still going to be very free and loose by the time I'm done because of the extra 2 inches allowance I have there. So I'm just cutting everything out, cutting through the armhole as well, so that we can have a smaller part to work with. So now moving over to the top so that I can work on the neckline, I'm just going to come down from the shoulder point there by 5 inches. So I took 3 inches for my neck width, so I'm just going to come down from that shoulder point by 5 inches. I'll draw a line across there. I won't be using the top there. There's going to be a strap, so that strap will just take up the 5 inches there. Now I'm just going to come down from this line by 3 more inches, and if I calculate everything, if I just measure from the top, it is 8 inches that I am coming down by. So that's just like my neck depth, 8 inches. So I will just mark 3 inches there, and then I'm just going to be connecting it into the armhole. So before I draw it into the armhole, I'll just come in on the armhole on that line there by 1.5 inches, and then I'll just draw a line connecting these 2 points together. So I'm using my curve rules, just very slight. I'll just make a very slight curve from this point down here to somewhere close to the armhole, just like you see me do, and then I'm just going to connect from that point into the armhole now. So this is like my new armhole, so I'm just going to use my curve ruler to just make this connection into the armhole, and then I'll just go ahead and cut it out. So this is basically it for the drafting of the pattern. I'll be using this to cut out the front and the back pieces. This is the fabric I'll be using for this. This is a crepe fabric. It is light and it is flowy. You need something flowy for this project. I have about 4 yards of it. So now here I've placed my fabric on a fold, and then I placed the pattern paper on it to cut out the front piece. So I left 0.75 inches from the folded edge of the paper before I placed it on there, because there's going to be like an opening in front. I'm going to be slashing that part open, which I'm going to join later, but I need some inches to join it, like a joining allowance. And at the top there, the neckline area, I'll be adding ½ inch so that I can fold the neck in, and on the armhole as well, I'll add ½ inch also. On the side, I'm not going to be adding any allowance to the side because I already have enough allowance, which is 2 inches on the side. So from the waistline, I'm going to come down by my actual knee measurement, which is 21 inches, and then I'll just mark that point. So this is to like know where my slit is going to start from. There are going to be 2 slits on this dress, on the right side and on the left side. So that knee line I'm marking is like a landmark to know how high I want my slit to be. So you can go upward, you can go as high as you want. So I'm just trying to use my knee measurement for this. Now I'll take this side straight down. I'm not trying to make this penciled. I'll just mark straight down and I'll cut it off just like I have done here. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to mark out how wide I want my slit to be. So now on this knee line I have drawn out, I'll take my bust span measurements divided by 2, which is 4 inches, and then I'll add the 0.75 inches inches I have kept before the paper, just so that I can have the allowance, because I'm going to be slashing through to the end of the dress as well. On the end of the dress, I'm also going to mark the bust span measurement. So my entire dress is about 64 inches. If I have not mentioned already, it's 64 inches. I want it to be very long and to kiss the floor. So now on each side of this line, of this my bust span line, I would mark 1.5 inches to the right and to the left, making a total of 3 inches, and I'll just draw it all the way to the top, just like I'm trying to mark out a dart, something like that. So I'm just going to draw it to the top, and on that top there, I'll just make a little curve just so that it will not be pointy at that top there, and I'll just connect the lines like this, and I'll go ahead and cut it open. I'm trying to do this to make a space here so that the flounce can like show very well and everything will not be very clogged up and tight around that slit area. Now after cutting it, I'll go ahead and slash open that midpoint. So from the lower part there, I'll just cut it all the way through the middle till I get to the neckline. So now this is it for the front. For now, I'll take out the paper and then I'll go ahead and just open it. It was looking funny when I opened it this way, but we have to trust the process. So now I'm just trying to show where the flounce will be coming from, the midpoint and the 2 slits opening on the right and the left. So now this is the back piece. To go ahead and cut out the back, I'm just going to use the same pattern I used for the front, but this time around I'll be placing it very on the edge, directly on the edge of the folded fabric. So I'll go ahead and fold in the top on the chest line. I'll just fold it down, fold it inside the top of the paper on that chest line, because the back is not going to have any armhole, the back is not going to have any zip. So the zip is going to be on the side, so I'm not putting any zipper allowance for this. So I'll just fold that top in that way, and then I'll draw a straight line down just like I did for the front, and I'll go ahead and just cut it out. So on the top where I have the folded edge at the top there, I'm going to add 0.5 inch allowance to that top, and then I'm just going to cut it out just like this. And that is just it for the back. The back doesn't really have any issues. So now for the front here, I've placed the paper back on the front pieces, the 2 front pieces, and now I'll just go ahead and mark the waistline. I'm just going to try to make some notches on the waistline, because all the flounce that will come from the midpoint and the side of the front would start from the waistline. So I'm just trying to notch this waistline so that I can have accurate measurements when I am putting the flounce. So going down to the end, I'm just trying to measure the length of this slit opening on the lower part and on the side. At the top here as well, I'm going to also cut out flounce for the top. That's what I'm going to be using to fix the cape at the top here. Now going on to cut out the flounce, I'll be using this small piece of paper just to illustrate how I'm going to cut it, because I'll be cutting it on the fabric plainly and I won't be able to show all that. So I'll fold my paper into 2. You fold your fabric into 2 like this, and you further fold it again. So you're folding it into 4, just like I'm doing here. And then after folding it into 4, I'll just use my marker to mark the midpoint of this paper, and then I'll open it up. Then on that point there, I'm just going to draw a straight line through that midpoint on one side and on the other side, just like I'm making a cross. It doesn't have to be to the end of the paper. It's just for the starting landmark. Now, depending on the length of your flounce, how long you want the flounce to be, I'm just going to mark 1 inch because I'm working with a small paper. So I'll just mark 1 inch round all those 4 points. So I'll start drawing like I'm trying to draw a circle. So from 1 point to the second, to the 3rd point there, and then now to this other point, to this other 4th line. Now instead of connecting it to make a circle, I will go down by 1 inch when I get to that end. Instead of connecting it, I'm going down, and then I will just draw from that 4th line down to meet this 1 inch below the first line I started with. I hope you understand. I'm just using a marker just to make it more visible. So instead of having a circle, when I get to one point as almost making a circle, I'll go down. So if you're using 3 inches for your flounce or 5 inches, when you get there, you go down by 5 inches again. So I'll continue marking that 1 inch, since that is what I'm using as this illustration. I'll continue marking that 1 inch all around this point like this, and then I'll just continue from here, going around all the points I have marked. So I'll just keep joining from one point to the other. You have to just mark it at close points so that you can have an equal and even flounce. So I'll just keep going 1 inch. I'll mark another 1 inch again. So I'm just going to keep going round and round and round, just like this. So as you can see, this is how everything will go, just like a spiral form, something like this. So now I'm just going to cut it out. Now I'm done marking. I'm just cutting everything out now, just so that we can see how it turns out. So now after cutting out everything to the midpoint all round, I'm just going to go ahead and cut it on the fabric. So I have been able to get the midpoint on my fabric. It's just the same thing I did on the paper is what I'm doing on the fabric here. The only difference is that my fabric, I'll be using 4.5 inches as the length of my flounce. You know, the paper was just 1 inch for the illustration. So marking the midpoint down there, I'll come down by 4.5 inches on one side, 4.5 on the second line, on the third line, and on the fourth line there. So if you didn't understand what I did on the paper, you can just follow up a bit from here. So I'll connect from one point to the second, then to the third, and then the fourth line. Now instead of going back to the point I started, now this is just me connecting to the fourth line. Instead of going back to that point there, I would go down again by 4.5 inches from there, and I'll connect it downward, skipping that first point there. So now I'm just trying to make sure I have an even measurement so that one part of the flounce will not be shorter than some other parts. Now I'm connecting it this way, so I'm just going to continue going round by 4.5 inches until I am okay. So the entire flounce I cut out for this, for the flounces on the two sides of the body, on the two slits in front and in the midpoint, also including the flounce that I used to put the cape, everything was about 200 inches, let's just say, but over 200 inches to be on a safe side. So I'm just going to cut it out this way until I get to that midpoint, just like I did on the paper. So now this is it after cutting everything out. I have a very long piece of flounce. So now I'm going to go ahead and start sewing. So I'll sew down the dart on the front. These are the front pieces here. I would also sew down the dart on the back pieces as well. And then I'll come back and show you. So this is it after sewing it out. This is the dart on the back. And then I've gone ahead to sew down the dart on the front here as well. Now I'll proceed to attach the flounce. I'll first of all attach the flounce to the slits on the two sides of the front. I went ahead to weave the ends of my flounce. You can fold it in twice, but I went ahead to just weave mine. Now the way I'm going to be attaching it, on the lower part of this slit, I'll place the flounce right there, but this is going to be on the wrong side of the fabric. So I'm just going to be placing any side of the flounce, wrong or right side, it doesn't matter. So it's advisable to use a fabric that is not really contrasting on the right side and on the wrong side. So I'll place it down there, and I'm just going to pin it round that slit open area, and then I'll go ahead and sew it down. So this is it after sewing it down. I'll just cut up the little excess I have at that lower part there, and now I'm going to flip it over to the right side. You know, this is the wrong side, so I'll flip it to the right side now. I'm flipping it over here. I'm just going to fold it in, and then I will make a top stitch at that point there, just straight down. So you can weave it at the open ends, but I just want to make a top stitch. Now I'll just take it to my machine and sew it down. So this is what I mean. I ironed it first, and then I made a top stitch just on the top there all around. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to just do what I did on one side of the front here on the other side of the front piece. You can see how neat it is looking on one side. Now I'll just do the same thing on the other part. So this is it after sewing it down on the other part of the front. Now I'm just going to attach the flounce at the top. So it is going to be like a cape, and it is going to come from the midpoint of the front to the midpoint of the back. So it's going to go from the front all around to the back. So if I measure the entire length of this, I have about 21 inches in total. That was what I used for this. So now I just pinned one side. I'm just going to show how I did that. So the flounce at the top is double. So one of it measures 6 inches, right? I went ahead to cut out another one of 6 inches. You know, the first one I cut out was 4.5 inches. So they are double. I'm just going to be using the 4.5 inches to overlap the 6 inches. So this here is the 6 inches I have placed down, 6 inches in length. I've just placed it down and I pinned it on the neck part of the front. Now I'm just going to bring the 4.5 inch flounce that I cut out initially, the first one I cut out, so that I can show you how I'll be sewing everything together. So I place the 6 inches flounce on the right side of this dress, on the right side of the fabric. Now I'm just going to place the 4.5 inches on the wrong side, still at the top there. I'll just pin it down, making sure that the 6 inch flounce, the body of the dress, and then the 4 inch flounce are all aligned together at the same point, just at the top. So after pinning it together, I'll sew it on that wrong side, and when I turn it over, I have a very neat edge at the top. You understand? So I'll just go ahead and sew it down on one side and on the other side. So before I continue with the sewing, I'm just going to cut out the straps for this dress. I'm going to be cutting it out with a length of 14 inches. I'm cutting out 2 pieces, one strap for one side and the other for the other side. So this is 14 inches and I'll mark it with a width of 1.5 inches. So I'll mark it down there all the way to the top and I'll cut it out because I want the straps to be tiny. So I'll fold it this way into 2, sew it close to the edge, and then I'll turn it inside out. So that's just how I did the straps. So now, as you can see here, I have gone ahead to sew it down like I showed earlier, and the 4.5 inch flounce is overlapping the 6 inch flounce here. So I attached the straps inside before sewing it down. I just put it in like you're seeing here. I also went ahead to hem the armhole point just here. So the flounce are attached at the top. They stopped just at the armhole curve, just at the top. So now I'm just going to go ahead and start attaching the flounce to this front piece. So one flounce is going to be at the midpoint, so that's what I'm going to start with now. So bringing that flounce from the waistline on the midpoint, you know I notched it earlier, I notched that waistline earlier. I'm just going to place the flounce here, and then I would pin it down. And to make it easier to understand, I'm just going to place one side of the front piece on the other side, making sure that the flounce is in the middle. The flounce is in between one part of the front and the other part of the front. You get? So I'll just go ahead and pin all 3 pieces together like you're seeing me do here, making sure that the flounce is in between the 2 pieces of the front. So I'll just pin it from there all the way to the end of the dress. So now when I open it up, this is how it's going to be on the inside. The flounce is inside in between, and I'm just going to go ahead and pin the top as well, making sure that the flounce at the top is also in between the 2 pieces of the front. So I don't want anything being outside at that midpoint, so I'll make sure that everything is nicely tucked in. I'll just pin it down here. So after pinning, I'll just take it to the machine and sew all the way from the middle point of that top where I have the cape. I'll sew it straight down to the end of the dress. So after sewing it down, this is it. Everything is closed in the middle. The next thing I'm just going to do now is to attach the flounce to the sides. So on that waist point of the side, like I notched, I'm just going to be placing the flounce, one on the right side and the other on the left. And I'll sew the flounce on the right side of the front piece. So I want to first of all attach the flounce to the front before I join the front and the back pieces together. So placing the flounce on one side there, I'll just pin it down, and then on the other side as well, I'll sew it. So this is it now. After I've joined them, I've attached the flounce on the right and the wrong side from the waistline down to the end of the dress. So now the next thing I'm going to do here is to attach the strap to the back piece of this dress. So now I'm placing the back piece on the front, right sides facing. I'll just pick that strap from the front, and then I have cut out this tiny piece of fabric that I'm going to be using like a bias. It's about 1.5 inch or 1 inch wide. So I'm just going to place this strap on the right side of the back piece, and I'll place this bias fabric I cut out here on top of the strap. and I'll just spin it down this way. I'll sew it on that wrong side, then I'll flip it over just like this, making sure that the strap is in between the bias and the back piece. So I'll do it for the two sides. I'll sew it open there and then I'll turn it over. So this is it after sewing it. I just hope you understand. I just sewed it like a bias, making sure that the strap was inside. Now I'm just going to go ahead and shape up the dress. So still placing the right sides facing the back and the front, I would go ahead and tuck in the sides of the flounce. I'll just tuck it in, making sure that everything is on the inside, and then I'll start taking my measurements. So from the top there, which is my chest line, I'm going to take my bust circumference measurements divided by 2. So that is 19.75 or so. So I have an extra 4 inches. So I'll just be separating that 4 inches. 2 inches would go to one of the sides and 2 inches will go to the other side. So this is the easiest way I take my measurement. So I'm just going to mark 2 inches on one side there. Now on my waistline, I'm also going to take my waist circumference measurements divided by 2. It is 16 inches and the total here I have is 20 inches. So I'm also going to divide 2, so that means I have an extra of 4 inches. So 2 inches will go to one side and 2 inches will go to shape up the other side. So I want the bust area and the waist area to be a bit fitted, but for the ends of this dress from the hip, I don't want it to be so tight because this dress is free and flowy. So I'm not going to be taking the entire hip measurement on my hip line. So I'm just going to be sewing it down by about 1 inch or 1.5 inch on the side. So I have gone ahead to sew it down on the top there on my waistline. So I did not sew down the two sides because I'm going to be inserting my zip to one of the sides, which is the right side. So I measured down to about 1 inch below my hip area, and I'll go ahead and sew down the other end and fix my zip at the top. So this is it. I used an invisible zip for this. I have sewed down one side and I've gone ahead to sew down my zip on this side, as you can see. And from the part after the zip, I just joined the front and the back together all the way down to the end. So the next thing I'm going to do is to just attach the flounce all the way around from the front to meet the midpoint of the back. So now for this flounce, what I would have done earlier would have been to sew it the way I sewed down the front, but I discovered late that the flounce actually met at the midpoint of the back. So now measuring from the midpoint of the front all the way around to the midpoint of the back, I have 21 inches, and I mentioned that earlier already. So I'm just going to cut off the excess I have here, and that 21 inches would give me enough ease. It will not be too tight or too loose. So you're going to have to take your measurements and make adjustments where necessary. So placing the two sides just by each other, no one overlapping the other, I'm just going to show you how I'll be sewing it to the body of the back piece. So I'll just raise the 4.5 inch flounce on top, and then I'll sew it down. I'll sew the 6 inch on top of the body of the back piece. So I'll just sew it from the point that the two flounces are meeting. I'll just sew it backwards, just close to where I have the strap, and that's just how I'm going to sew the two sides together. So at this point I had sewn them down just inside. So on the top, this is how it's looking. I didn't sew the armhole so that I'm going to have ease to move my arms around. So now this is it. I went ahead to weave the ends of the flounce, the areas I had not weaved earlier. And I also weaved the lower part, so you can fold it in 2 times if you want. So inside as well, I also weaved everything on the inside because this fabric frays a lot. So I just had to weave everything all around, inside, outside, and that is it for the making of this dress. Thank you so much guys for watching this video up to this point. Please, if you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up. Also subscribe to my channel if you haven't, and turn on your notification bells so you get notified when I post a new video. So this is the end of this tutorial. I hope to see you in my next one. Bye.